They Blue Collar Millionaires back again with John Fodera, our financial expert, everything term loans, line of credit, factoring, everything you need for your business. I use him. He's been an incredible asset to me. John's going to talk about line of credits today. John, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. So this is something that I feel every single business absolutely needs. So if anyone is watching this and you do not have a line of credit, the only call to action I want you to take is to go get a line of credit. Don't care if it's with me or anyone else. Have a line of credit, okay? And now go into why a little bit later, but let's talk about some of the types of lines of credit. You have an interest-only line of credit. You have a principal and interest, okay? You have weekly repayments, monthly repayments. When you're talking about weekly, they're typically going to be in the fintech space. What terms look like are usually anywhere from 6 to 36 months. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, interest-only lines of credit. Yes.
Real quick interruption. Explain what the fintech space is.
Fintech is finance and technology. And so what you have seen is there's almost like a secondary market for business financing and business credit. And they run off algorithms and just pure amounts of data, right? A good example of this is like an Idea Financial, or the one that most people would understand or see because they advertise online and on TV is On Deck. On Deck, their line of credit is usually in the 30s, if best case scenario, and sometimes higher. And they also have a cash advance program. So sometimes the fintechs are great, sometimes they're not good, right? It depends on where you go and how well you're going to score out. An interest-only line of credit is one that you will only see at the major banks. So Chase, I have one, and I've had them in the past. And typically, they're going to have some level of a term, 1 to 5 years, okay, if you're going to the bank. And these lines of credit need to get cleaned up every so often. When I say cleaned up, I mean bring it down to zero. And here's some of the pros on this, right? So this isn't a typical terms. Interest-only payments that are monthly, and it's going to be prime plus. So my line of credit right now is probably sitting at 12 or 13% from Chase, okay, with a balloon payment at the end of the term to quote unquote clean it up. What you can expect is a draw fee. The draw fee is going to be between 1 and 4%, right? And that's not added on to the interest rate. That's what they're going to ding you every time you make a draw. Now, what are the benefits? Well, an interest-only line of credit is going to have the lowest payment. It's not even close, all right? And it's easy to track how much interest is getting paid on accounting. To be fair, all of them are pretty easy to track that. And you can get those reports from the lender at any time. And then here's why. I mean, the reality is every single business needs a line of credit because you need access to cash. In good times, you want access to cash for expansion. In bad times, you want access to cash for emergencies. And at all times, you want to be able to access cash that isn't coming from you personally or on a personal credit card, because then all you're going to do is hurt your personal credit and you're not building your business credit. This is why it's so important to do this, right? It'll build your business credit and allows for flexibility for you and the company. Now, one thing I want to go over on this interest only, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. And this is why I do not recommend these for the majority of people. I've seen more people get in trouble with an interest-only line of credit from their bank than any other program. I myself got into a really sticky situation with one where we had a local bank that just loved the partnership group of a gym franchise that I was going into. So they gave us a $500,000 line of credit. Well, the gym failed and we were only paying interest-only payments. Okay, so when the gym failed and we had to unwind it, we still had $500,000 to pay between 3 of us to pay that down. Okay, and that could be financially crippling for the average person. And so that's the main reason why I suggest that most entrepreneurs do not use an interest-only line of credit. And if you do, make sure that you're using it the right way, which is you draw on it and then you pay it back as soon as humanly possible. 1, you're going to save on the cost, and 2, you don't wind up in the sticky situation that I did. All right, now principal and interest. What does this mean? It just means that every single payment you make, whether it's weekly or monthly, is going towards principal and interest, and they will usually show you a breakdown or amortization schedule. All right. What I love about this is there's no large balloon at the end. So let's say you have a $200,000 line of credit for 24 months and you draw 50,000, you know that 50,000 is scheduled to pay off in 24 months, both principal and interest, unless you pay it early. What are some of the typical terms on this? 6 to 36 months, weekly or monthly payments. Some of these fintech companies have simple interest and some have monthly interest. A good example of monthly interest, it's basically the same as having a credit card for your business, except they call it a line of credit. If you're wise, you can use that very, very, very judiciously to build your business. But out of those two, I would always tell you go with the simple interest because it's not going to accrue the same way monthly interest will. And again, monthly interest can get you into a lot of trouble. Simple interest rates usually start at 8% and go up from there. What can you expect on a typical line of credit? What is that true range? It's really going to be 8 to about 25%. Okay. That is the true cost of capital that is going to be ranging. Now, you can also control the cost of capital on a line of credit by simply choosing to pay it off early and save on any of the remaining interest. And it doesn't matter what kind of line of credit you have. If you have the ability to do that, you should. What are some of the benefits? Access to cash whenever you need it. It's going to build your business credit. It gives you that flexibility. Here's something that most people don't believe. We can get these set up in 24 to 72 hours. And they're going to be easier and more client friendly, meaning you're not going to get stuck with a big balloon at the end. The other thing that the major banks do on credit cards and lines of credit, and we're starting to see this now, is they will go through and reduce the lines and reduce your credit limits. All right. Chase will do it. B of A will do it. Amex does it all the time. I'm starting to see that now. Whereas the fintech ones, I haven't seen anyone get reduced. What they will do is they'll pause your ability to draw if the business is in a really, really, really bad spot. But it's your job to make sure it never gets there. All right. So let's talk about how to use it strategically. Financing programs need to match the lifespan or the use of funds. Okay. What I mean by that is lines of credit are short-term financing instruments. So you wouldn't want to buy a property for the business using your line of credit. Why? Because that property should be financed over 20 to 30 years, not 6 to 36 months. Okay. And when you use the wrong program for growth or to finance your business, you will have serious repercussions to deal with, right? Like this, if you were to buy this property on a line of credit, it would absolutely kill your cash flow. Same thing goes the other way, like equipment financing. If equipment lasts 3 to 5 years, some of it maybe 10 years, and you use a line of credit to pay for that, well, one, you're not building comparable debt. And two, it's going to hurt your cash flow because you could have paid for that over 5 years instead of, let's say, 2. And it works the other way, guys. If you use long-term financing for short-term uses, that could hurt you. Here's a great example. Using an SBA loan to buy equipment that only has a 5-year shelf life because you're going to be paying for that in years 6 through 10 and the equipment's already out of use. All right. So what do we use lines of credit for? Well, we use them for short-term things only, opportunities, emergencies, inventory, supplies, adding people to your team, marketing, and everyday expenses. All right. That's all you should use a line of credit for. Now, what do you want to avoid? Avoid keeping large balances. If you keep large balances, you're going to pay a lot more and the cost of capital is going to be higher. Avoid balloon payments. It's very hard to predict when your business is going to be flush with cash. All right. So if you have a large balloon payment coming up and something happens a month or 2 or 3 before that's due, it will absolutely throw off everything in your business. Then you get into a state of panic, okay, because you have this big bill due and you have no idea how to pay it. And that's when people usually make their worst mistakes. All right. Not consistently asking for an increase. If you have a line of credit, you should, whether you need it or not, ask every 3 to 6 months for an increase. Okay. If you have to send in additional bank statements, if you have to send year-to-date financials, you should. Why? Because you can never have enough access to cash. Just because you have access to cash doesn't mean you have to use it. But the access is what's key, right? Not planning. Those balloon payments, plan for them. If you do have a line of credit right now and you know a balloon's coming due, please, please, please play that out and have a plan to address that. And then again, don't use a line of credit for long-term items. Never use it for equipment, debt consolidation, or property. Now, where to get a line of credit? I'll explain some of the differences. Bank, broker, marketplace, fintech company. Bank is going to be a yes or no. It'll probably be a slow yes or no, right? What'll help you is if you have a relationship with that bank previously. I had a relationship with Chase. I'm in the private client services. They actually called and said, hey, do you want this? I said, absolutely. A broker. Most brokers should have access to lines of credit. They're mostly going to be fintech lines of credit, but at least they'll help you position it. Where I would be very, very, very cautious is a broker saying something's a line of credit and it actually turns out to be a cash advance. That you have to be very careful of. All right. And how will you know it's a cash advance and not a line of credit? You have to figure out if you pay it off early, is there a full and complete discount and waiving of the remaining interest? Or is it just a small discount and they're still taking a lot of the cost? If they are, that's a cash advance. It's not a line of credit and they're just dressing it up like a line of credit. A marketplace lender. So we are a marketplace lender, which means we have access to every program. And our job is to fit you into the one that makes the most sense, is the best program that you can qualify for. And then you can go directly to the fintech companies. I would advise against that because you don't know what their qualifications are. You don't know what's going on there and you don't know the structure, right? So you could apply to a couple of those companies. And if it's not positioned properly, you're just going to get a decline. You're going to get frustrated. Okay. I always recommend working with a professional. All right, let's talk about qualifications. Typically, personal credit above 650, they want to see time in business greater than 2 years. That doesn't mean if you're in business a year, you can't get a line of credit. I've gotten people a line of credit that have been in business a year. What's the difference between those that get it in a year versus 2 years is how high their credit is, how strong their cash flow is, how's their business credit. If the rest of it looks really strong, then we might get over that time in business hump. Okay. Great cash flow. Great cash flow looks like 8+ deposits a month, over $50,000 in revenue a month, and ideally keeping at least 10% of your monthly revenue or at least $3,000 to $5,000 in the bank at all times. And here's what really hurts people when they go for a line of credit. Having a couple negative days or having lower average daily balances. It will also hurt you when you go to finance equipment sometimes. So if you can maintain that 10% rule, meaning if you have a company that's doing $300,000 a month in sales, in revenue, as long as you keep $30,000 in the bank at all times, that is a great starting point to get any type of financing that you want. What do you need to get this done? 1-page application, 6 months of business bank statements. If you accept credit cards, the last 2 months of payment processing, driver's license, voided check, most recent business tax return. It's really that simple. The only advice I would give you, and this is because I know we operate, and this is all blue collar, is seasonality. Okay. So please take note of this. If you are a seasonal business, and what I mean by seasonal is you do better in the spring, summer, winter, fall. It doesn't matter what season. Okay. Then you should send in 12 months of business bank statements. And also there is a science to when you should apply. You should apply when you're coming out of your strong season. Okay. Not the very last month, but maybe the tail end of it. Why? Because they're going to see the stronger revenue months, which should have stronger cash in the bank. And it shows that you really don't need it. And the best time to apply for a line of credit is when you don't need it, because you will score out the highest. And that is the trick to getting the type of approval that you want. Again, how long does it take? If it's clean, 24 to 48. If it's a weaker application, 48 to 72. Best time to apply is when you don't need it. Best practices, I'll leave that up there. It's really simple. Opportunity emergencies, short-term things only on a line of credit. Use it, pay it off. Do not carry large balances. Ask for an increase every 6 months. And never go negative and never bounce payments to your line of credit provider. The more credit you have access to, the more stable that business will be and the easier it will be to grow and scale.
This was gold, man. I got one question. I remember when I first started doing reconstruction with my restoration business several years ago, I found myself waiting 90, 120 days with insurance payments coming in. So I was floating the cost and the bank account got extremely slim. So the stress level was very high because I had payroll that came out every single week. I went to the local banks that I actually had my account with, and they saw all of the money flowing through. And the question was, what does it look like to get a line of credit? They said, how much would you like? I said, I think 20,000 will be just fine. And that'll keep me afloat. And they said, what do you have in collateral? And I said, well, what kind of collateral are you looking for? I said, I've got a bunch of paid off drying equipment and whatnot, but if you're looking for property, I don't have any collateral for you to put a lien on because nothing's paid off. And then they asked me about my personal home. Long story short, I did not get a line of credit from that bank that I had my operating business account on. Do you have to have collateral with your lines of credit?
No, the exception, first off, collateral, even at the SBA level, only comes into play at 350 or higher. Okay. So collateral on 20,000 is probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life, Chris.
I was sitting with the 800 personal credit score, never going into the negative, had been with them I started with that bank as a startup. So I think I was around like year 2, maybe even year 3 with them as a checking account. And it was my primary business checking account. I know it was ridiculous at this point in the game.
So here's what I love about that. First off, that was the wrong product at the time. You should have set up invoice factoring. Okay. So if you're watching this, if anyone is watching this and you want a line of credit because you are net 15, net 30, net 45, net 60, so you're always waiting for payments, you do not set the line of credit up first. You set up invoice factoring, and then once invoice factoring is in place, then we set up a line of credit. Because a line of credit will not fix that problem. It will only make it worse. Okay, short term, it'll make it better. Long term, it'll make it much worse. If you have factoring set up and then the line of credit, you are absolutely covered from every angle. Second, these lines of credit, they should never have collateral. The only type of line of credit that would ever include collateral is if you came to me and you wanted to do a asset-backed line, okay, an ABL, they call it, all right? And an asset-backed line will take collateral, and it will take a first lien on all receivables, but it will allow you to draw, and it'll be a much higher line of credit, right, on that ABL. So in that case, yes, they would ask for collateral, but you are getting a much, much larger line of credit, and that is normal.
Good stuff, man.
And I got a quick question. Lines of credit, we understand that if you get a line of credit, it doesn't show up on your personal credit report. But how do other banks know if you have another credit line with them? How does Chase know if you got a $50,000 line, whether you're using it or not? If you got one with, say, Blue Line, do they know that? Is it because the filing, or how does that work?
Yes, Kevin, you are spot on. So here's how everyone will know that you have a line of credit. Anytime you do any financial transaction, when it involves a business, they usually place a lien, or what they call a UCC lien. That could be against all assets, or it could only be against receivables. All right. So in that case, if you had, let's say, a Chase line of credit and you wanted to open another one, they would see that you have Chase. On the flip side, let's say if you had Idea, okay, or like Blue Vine, and then you go to Chase, Chase is probably going to have you pay that off versus using a fintech line of credit on top of a bank's. If the bank's in there first, the fintech has no problem. A lot of times when you're doing invoice factoring, you have to be first position as a lien holder, right? So that's the only time factoring gets thrown off. But for lines of credit, for the most part, they are a little bit more flexible with what position they're in. The only time they're really not is if it's going to be like a larger one from, let's say, a Chase, a Wells, Citi. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't have them now, but back in like 2005 or 2006, I had 50 with Bank of America, 50 with PNC, 50 with this. Did they all know that I had 50? I wasn't even using half of them, but they were so easy to get.
Is it the same legal entity?
Yeah, it was the same company. It was under the same, yeah.
Okay, so if it's the same company, Kevin, could they technically look it up? Yes. One of the things that is a best practice for every business owner is once you have any type of financing, and you had that UCC on there, you should always, if it's paid off, you should always call them up and ask for them to give you the release or termination, so it's not on the business. Couple reasons you
So-
do that. One, the UCC data, that's public data. I promise you, everyone scrapes that data all the time. So you don't want people scraping that data only to call you and hound you. Two, let's say you go to sell the business, you're going to have to get all those removed anyway. You can't sell a business with liens on it. So you might as well be proactive. And once things are paid off, ask for the lien to be released and then just save all that paperwork in like a Google Drive.
If you have a line of credit for any, and it say 50,000, zero, that's zero. Is there a lien on it then? Or only if you use it?
So if you never used the line of credit,
Or you used it 3 years ago and it's been at zero for 2 years or whatever?
technically it would still be on there unless you ask them to release it. Yeah. So here's why they do that, guys. Just so you know, it gives them an advantage. So like Kevin, if you were shopping again for a line of credit, right?
Yeah.
The thought process is you'd probably go back to the first place that gave you that $50,000 line of credit from, let's say, B of A. So them having that UCC there, it will at least hold up the process somewhere else, right? And then maybe you have to call back to B of A, and then they're going to say, hey, we could give you $100,000 now because you've grown so much. So yes, I would tell you it's probably still on there, but I can't be positive unless I pulled it myself.
And you can see that on your business credit report, or how does somebody look at that?
There's a way to pull it. I can get you guys the system. I forget, I don't recall on the top of my head, but we can do it and I can show you that.
Okay. Just curious on how that works.
And guys, the equipment.
Yeah.
Like it's on invoice factoring, it's on equipment, it's definitely on an SBA. And this is kind of some of the challenges you'll run into depending on what SBA you have when you position factoring, right? Because there is a logical order in which you have to do things. And I can't tell you how many times on the back end of us setting up things for clients, I actually have to be the intermediary between two different financial institutions and get what we call a subordination letter or an intercreditor agreement, right? I would say I've probably had to do 7 of those just in July alone, where I'm connecting 2 different banks, making sure that they're both okay with what's going on, and then they come up with an intercreditor agreement or a subordination letter so they can get the transaction done.
Awesome. Good deal, man.
Very-
Jonathan.
Oh, John, appreciate it.
Man,
Thanks,
yeah.
guys.
Anybody that wants to get in touch with Jonathan about lines of credit, and it sounds like everyone needs to get in touch with him just to pull a report and see what's happening. And then whether you need it now or not, he just said, dig the well before you're thirsty. Get it while the money's looking good, so you have it when you need it.
I love the timing. Time that. Get it before you need it.
Yep.
So
That's
reach
the
out
key.
to him, Jonathan at integratedbusinessfinancing.com. Jonathan at integratedbusinessfinancing.com. Jonathan, appreciate you, man. We'll see you next
Thanks,
Thursday.
guys. See ya.